Hello there and welcome to AIDS 2020 Virtual Daily, brought to you in partnership with Plus Life, where we turn positive into a plus. I'm Karl Schmid. Joining me today is Emmy, Grammy and Tony Award-winning multi-hyphenate Billy Porter, and a special interview with Dr. Alan McOwan, Service Director at 56 Dean Street in Soho, London. You won't want to miss either. But first, it's time for the science of the day. Yesterday's opening press conference focused on the intersection between HIV and COVID-19. Today, the conference turns its full attention to HIV science, with big news anticipated for both prevention and treatment. In terms of prevention, there will be an eagerly awaited update for the trial of a long-acting injectable for PrEP. On the treatment front, there's buzz about a report from Brazil on what may be the first adult with HIV to achieve long-term HIV remission without a bone marrow transplant. We're also expecting new data from the Tsepamo study in Botswana, an ongoing observational study looking at whether the drug dolutegravir may cause neural tube birth defects. And new data from the SEARCH study examining PrEP's impact on HIV incidence in rural Kenyan and Ugandan communities. Keep an eye out for all the breaking science news all day, news that could change the lives of everyone with HIV. AIDS 2020 is about science, but it's also about community. And today, we're sitting down with multi-award winner Billy Porter. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
I wish we were doing this in person, but you know, this is such an important conference. We all get together every 2 years to do this. And I want to ask you right off the bat, when did you first learn, hear, notice HIV?
I was 12 years old and I was having dinner with my family, and the first news story came on the news about the gay cancer and how gay men were dying from this mysterious cancer. And I was in my own sort of particular kind of trauma at the moment, in that moment, that connected me to the story and made me investigate what homosexual meant, because I didn't know what it meant. I didn't have the language for that. And when I figured out what homosexual meant, I realized that that was what I was. And at 12 years old, I thought, I'm going to die. I'm going to die.
Yeah, I mean, it is that pivotal time in your life when you're 12, you're also, as you just perfectly said it, coming to grips with who you are and your sexuality, and then to have it splashed everywhere that this is the thing that's going to kill all the gay people. Let's talk about how unequal access to healthcare and HIV still goes untreated. It all bounces back to this whole stigma thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, you know, I think inside of this coronavirus epidemic, you know, while the cases and the deaths are disproportionate in terms of our culture and who it affects, I think that mirrors HIV in a lot of ways. You know, the system, there's a systematic injustice. There's a systematic hierarchy that ignores entire groups of people and creates generational poverty, generational health inequality and disparity. Even though it's disproportionate, white folks are dying too this time.
Right.
For those of us who are Black, for those of us who are people of color, very often it's not until white people get mad that something happens.
Yeah, I've had this conversation with so many friends that, oh, well, if it wasn't rich white people getting sick from this, perhaps we wouldn't be making such a fuss.
No, it's not perhaps. We wouldn't.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be making this fuss. I think what the great news is, with as horrible as it is that this coronavirus is actually affecting everyone, which forces people to have to look at it. You know, it's horrible that we have to get to the point of breaking, the tipping point that I call it. It's unnerving that it has to get to that point.
Yeah, and Billy, you've sort of answered my next question within that, which is why do moments like this matter? Obviously, with what is happening in race here in the United States, but beyond that, moments like the IAS, why we have all come together, people from all around the world joining virtually to talk about HIV, to talk about AIDS, policymakers, scientists, community members, household members, people like you, people like me. These moments matter more than ever before, don't they?
Yeah, well, you know, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called The Tipping Point, and I read it about 20 years ago in 2000. And like, he speaks of, you know, how different things layer on top of each other for the good and for the not so good. And it gets to a place where it can no longer exist, and it tips over, and the blowback from the tip over is where we are right now.
Yeah,
we have tipped, and it took us all of these years to get to the space to be at the tipping point. We're at the tipping point, and it has bubbled over, and it is glorious to see the work that's being done. It's glorious.
I'm gonna throw a word, you know, this is not really a quick fire round. I just want to do this one word with you, and I want to get your immediate reaction to it. I want you to think specifically sort of HIV, because we are here at the World AIDS Conference. Stigma.
Oppression.
How does it make you feel? How does that word, those words, HIV, stigma, what does that do inside Billy Porter?
It's double-edged. You know, it enrages me to action while simultaneously really making me feel less than. But the good news is, I don't know how to do anything other than fight. Like, that's the good news and the complicated news. As a Black queer man on this planet, I've been fighting since I could breathe. So I don't know anything else. I would love to live long enough where I can exist in the world where I don't have to fight for my rights every single day. Where my life and my humanity is not up for legislation. I'd like to live to see the day where we abandon that.
Billy, I couldn't have said it any better myself. You know, maybe we all live in a world free of inequality with a whole lot more love. Now we turn to a very personal story for me. Almost 13 years ago, on a foggy, cold, wet London day, I entered the Dean Street Clinic in Soho for my regular sexual health and HIV checkup. The HIV test came back positive. The first doctor I met with is my next guest, Dr. Alan McOwan, Services Director of the clinic, 56 Dean Street. We have not seen each other since that life-changing day in 2007. Dr. Alan McOwan, welcome, and it's nice to see you again.
Yeah, hello, Carl. It's lovely to see you as well.
I mean, we're talking about 12 years ago, I guess now, or I can't even do the math.
13 years, isn't it?
Yeah, 13 years ago. This might be a silly question because you've been doing this a long time, but do you remember anything of me and our interaction and our meeting?
Well, I guess I was surprised that I did actually recognise your face, actually, because obviously at the time we were diagnosing so many people HIV positive. So we were diagnosing about 60 to 70 people a month. Looking back, really made me realise how much my job has changed and how that interaction is very different. I mean, you tell me, Carl, what's your feeling? You've seen everything change.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've said very publicly about that day of my diagnosis, of coming in and having the rapid test and all of that. And it felt like a red digital countdown clock had started over my head, ticking backwards. Can't quite explain that. And my other and immediate thought was, how could have I done this to my parents? And I think Now that I've had time to look at that and analyze it, it's very interesting that that is all comes from the stigma and the fear and the shame that's associated with HIV. And we have come in 13 years a long, long way. In giving this information, though, does it ever get any easier? Has it gotten any easier with the advances and things like U equals U?
Well, I think so. The message nowadays feels much more, yes, things are different. And yes, if we could change things, we'd choose for you not to have HIV, clearly. But our aim is that you're going to live the life you always wanted to live, and do all the things you wanted to do. And we're here to help you do that. And so those messages are very, very positive messages to give somebody, whereas before you were giving people a lot of unsure messages.
What about patient reaction, out of curiosity? With the advent of undetectable equals untransmissible, what's the reaction like from people getting the diagnosis? Have you seen a shift in that? As you said, thank God you're seeing less people being diagnosed.
We've seen these huge falls in new diagnoses, which is just the most wonderful thing for someone who's been around since everybody, before there was triple therapy. It's just wonderful seeing this change and seeing the kind of journey of it. But what we're not seeing here at Dean Street, we diagnose about a quarter of England's HIV. We're not seeing any drops in the very youngest age groups. And so I find that personally very difficult when you meet a 19-year-old who, and they're positive and they don't really know much about HIV. They don't know anyone with HIV. They've never heard of U equals U. They've never heard the word antiretroviral or CD4 count. And yeah, I guess it kind of brings out like the kind of paternal bit of you. You kind of want to kind of scoop them up a bit, go, oh, let's try and make this all better. But it just also makes you a bit angry, because it also makes you think, this is completely unnecessary. We've got all these tools, and yet why is this still happening?
Yeah, and I think, obviously stigma plays a large part in that. As the world has, been gripped by this pandemic, and we have all gotten very used to doing everything from our homes, how has that, tell me about the obstacles that has caused as far as Dean Street Clinic and being able to get PrEP out to people.
We were really concerned that people wouldn't be able to access PrEP. And it was all very well to say, well, you're meant to stay 2 meters apart. The reality is not everyone would do that. We did all we could to try and keep people on it. I mean, I'm sure there are people out, and then we obviously were providing online information about if you aren't at risk at the moment, how you can safely stop. But I think now we're kind of getting to the point, I mean, certainly the streets of Soho are definitely starting to wake up. And so I think we're now kind of back. We tried to get people to test during lockdown, but now it's kind of like, how do we now get people to restart their PrEP appropriately? And now is also like the perfect time for people who haven't used PrEP before to start, having taken a period of a break from sex.
How are you guys changing in this day and age the stigma, I guess, that is associated with STI testing? It's funny, I was talking to some friends the other night, 2 straight white men in their early 20s, and I nearly fell off my chair when I discovered neither of them had been for an STI or HIV test, and they're both sexually active young men. And I was just shocked by that, and it all came down to the stigma. How's Dean Street helping change the way we look at getting our sexual health treatment and testing?
I guess I'm a great believer, if you don't make people feel like it should be stigmatized, they won't feel stigmatized. If you put loads of signs everywhere saying, please don't feel stigmatized, and smoke out all the windows and talk in hushed tones, you're giving people a message that they should feel stigmatized. I mean, to kind of big you up, Karl, I don't think you can underestimate how important it is for someone to say, I'm HIV positive, and kind of, and your point is, so what? Because often the narrative of these things is, oh, they're so brave, or they're so tragic, but actually just saying, no, I'm just a regular guy and I'm HIV positive, I'm living my life and I'm still successful and I'm not ashamed of it, is an incredibly powerful message to give people.
Thanks for joining us today. Join us again tomorrow for more science insights and interviews with the star of Netflix Queer Eye, Jonathan Van Ness, and a youth activist from Pakistan, Ramessa Roy William. I'm Karl Schmid, reminding you to live your best life by turning positive into a plus.